It's February 15th. I have been trapped in an elevator.
Looking forward to the long weekend.
Valentine's Day and President's Day. How often do you get that?
It's like the perfect storm, right?
Did we just stop? There has to be security guards. Where are they?
We're locked in this box, but we're still a million miles apart.
I'm an extremely private person. You don't even know me.
We'll be fine because we're honest with each other.
We've been in here for days. Get me out of here, please.
Happy fucking Valentine's Day.
Out today is episode number 5 of Hulu series Into the Dark. Now, if you're familiar with the Into the Dark series, you may have your puka doll, or maybe you spent New Year's Eve at a party that went astray. Now, this latest episode is called Down, and it's just in time for Valentine's Day. I mean, you got two strangers, they meet up on an elevator after hours, and when they get stuck in between floors, is it the perfect meet cute? Will they connect, and what could possibly go wrong? I mean, it is Matt Lauria, aka Luke Cafferty from Friday Night Lights, and joining us is the director, Daniel Stamm. Now, you may know him as the director of The Last Exorcism or the writer and director of A Necessary Death. Let's take the elevator down and talk to Daniel.
Hi, Chuck. How are you?
I'm doing great. Hey, I even got some, it's all high tech here. Now, let me tell you something. Just in case there's anybody out there that sees this and saying, wow, this is a little far-fetched, this could never happen. I present to you just 2 days ago in New York City, a woman was rescued after being trapped in an elevator for 3 days before she was found. Now, Daniel, was this some kind of a Hulu, fake story or something just to promote this movie?
That was my first thought when they sent me that. I was like, well, they are really going all out. That's where they must spend the money because it wasn't production. But then we sent that around and we're kind of celebrating it. And then we're like, oh, we should not be celebrating that. There is an actual poor woman that was stuck in there for 3 days. That can't have been fun. So
Yeah.
tragic incident, but kind of a huge funny coincidence for us.
Now, I want to say 90% of this movie takes place on the elevator with just only like 2 people. And to have a story like this to work, you have to have an interesting cast because they're in almost every scene together. And most importantly, you have to have a script that's going to keep the audience captivated. And pardon my pun there with the word captivated, but where did this writer come from? As far as I can tell, he's never written anything before.
It's interesting. Kent Kubina, the writer, is actually a very veteran Hollywood executive and has been an executive and producer on Black Christmas and on Gods of Egypt and like a lot of titles that you would recognize. But he would say, of course, he has written over the years, and Down is not his first script because he has written a couple of scripts that have never seen the light of day. But I think the first one that he was really passionate about was this one, and he worked on it for 5 years on and off, and finally dared to show it to his wife and said, is this any good? Can I show this to anyone? And luckily she liked it. And then he showed it to a childhood friend who is an agent now, who then took it out and brought it to Blumhouse, and they brought it to me. So that's where he's coming from. He's been around all along. He was actually one of the creators of Project Greenlight, which was an amazing show in itself. So he definitely has a track record, but just like you, no one knew him as a writer.
Yeah. Now, in the cast here, you basically have 2 leads. And of course, once again, it has to work. How difficult was it to find the right 2 people for this kind of like a play? Because it all takes place in one scene, more or less.
It was actually I want to say we scouted the world to find them, but it was actually the easiest thing in the world because they had been on a show called Kingdom together and playing boyfriend and girlfriend. And Jeremy Gold, who's the boss of Blumhouse TV, was the boss of that show. So he was actually the one who emailed us and said, have a look at these 2 guys. And I have to admit, when I first, just before I looked at anything, I just Googled pictures of them. And it was a picture of Matt Lauria on Kingdom, where he was a professional kickboxer that looked like a superhero with these huge muscles. And I never even looked at his stuff because I thought the look is completely wrong. We don't want to be caught in there with a weightlifter, you know. And then I looked up Natalie, and coincidentally, in what came up was a video of an interview with her and Matt because they had been on the same show. And that video was what sold me on the whole thing because they had such chemistry and they were so funny. And Matt looked much different than he had looked with all his tattoos and the fake teeth and all that in the picture that I had seen. And I loved them from there. And then I checked out their stuff and they were perfect for each other. And what was so great about it was their chemistry, because they had that. Normally, you spend half your energy as a director building that chemistry between actors. They came in like that. So that was a huge gift.
Well, because see, I would be thinking because I wasn't. I only know him from Friday Night Lights, and so I was not familiar with her at all. And my thought was I didn't know if they knew each other because I was thinking, as a director, would you want to keep these people apart, or just clears to show you that they're how great actors they are because they obviously never met until they got on the elevator. And I was thinking that it might be a good idea to keep these two apart. But then again, they're just that good, I guess.
It's interesting. I mean, that would definitely be an approach. It would just be a huge risk because this building chemistry procedure takes a while, and you usually do that in rehearsals. And sometimes it just doesn't work. And I think you definitely want to know that if they had never seen each other before, never worked with each other, I don't know if I would feel comfortable going into a movie that they are carrying and that their chemistry is carrying. But it was definitely different from all other things that I'd ever done in that we had to hide the chemistry in the beginning and really work against that to then step by step bring it out and fade it in rather than the other way around.
Yeah. Now I was bringing when I was writing down my thoughts in this movie. I kept thinking of the movie My Dinner with Andre because it's basically two people having a conversation at a dinner table, and it's almost the same thing here. You have because of the great script. If you can, by the way, we're combining this interview and my review together because if you haven't figured out, I really like this movie, and I call it a movie. It's because it's not an episode of TV. It's actually it's a movie. But you have humor, you have romance, you have tension at times, and I don't ever want to give anything away, but there are some scenes outside the elevator which take the movie into a whole new level of excitement. Now, can we even talk about this at all? How do you keep the scene, the play that's happening in this elevator, interesting to the viewer? Because that's what I was thinking. I'm like, wow, what is it? Is it all of those things I talked about?
It starts with the script, obviously, as you said. And I think what we did is to go through there and to cut out as much repetition, as much fat as we possibly could. It was a great script from the beginning. But every writer has kind of their patterns, how they write dialogue. And Kent's dialogue, as you can see in the movie, is very realistic and just flows really well and really nicely. But because it's so authentic, sometimes he does these loops, where we come back to a point that we were at before. So I think what we did together when we kind of looked at the script was to identify those loops and cut them out and make sure that every beat always builds to the next one, builds to the next one, builds to the next one. We always knew that we were going to take some time before the genre stuff kicks in. We always looked at it as this kind of mashup of the rom-com and the horror movie. But what was important was that we spend enough time with the characters to get to know them so that we care if something bad even happens to them or not. And a big weapon in that, obviously, is always humor. You always immediately like a protagonist that has a little bit of a self-deprecating kind of touch to himself, or in her case, because we don't really put all the protagonist hat on him. So it's very shared between them in the beginning. So that was important, I think, for us to kind of buy into them, get to like them, and then we can bring in the darkness and the Blumhouse of it all.
Now, as a director, though, is it easier or harder to direct a movie with basically one scene, the elevator?
I would say it's harder because there are so many kind of bells and whistles that you can normally use to keep the audience entertained and to show them something interesting. And here we'll have this camera move, and there we have the Tuscan countryside to kind of keep things beautiful. And there we have these extras, and there we have that stunt sequence. And if you take all of that away and basically say, here is a box, and there is no distracting the audience. Either the two actors are so spellbinding that the audience will stick with it, or they aren't. And if they aren't, there is no negotiating that. Your movie will hit the wall and you can't come back from that. There's no fixing that in post. So it was a really, really scary thing. And we always looked at it in terms of progression, this movie. We were like, if we are ever stalling and the audience doesn't have the feeling that there is a progression visually, then we have a problem. So what we did is we identified these moments where we could introduce a lighting change, which is what you saw in the movie, that every time there's some contact with the elevator, something changes in the lighting progression. So that we really had a feeling every 10 minutes there's a different act and we're moving on in the story. So you find these little tricks like that. But overall, for me, it was a huge leap of faith, and it was terrifying to actually do this.
Yeah, what a fantastic movie, because I thought it was going to go a couple different ways. I didn't know what was happening just as your viewers are watching it, it's unfolding. Now you obviously knew all this stuff in advance because you had the script and so forth, but was there a lot of change from the original script to what we saw, or did the editor have to tighten things up to keep things moving along?
Once and the story is absolutely the same. But once you have two actors that are as great as Natalie and Matt are, you just let them do their thing a little bit. And that also includes improvising their lines. There's so much energy and so much freshness coming from that it would be a real crime to kind of cut that off. And to Ken's big credit, he immediately was on board with that and said, whatever they want to do with it, it's a starting off point, let them do it. And interestingly, we kind of, I think, preserved the spirit of the script, and we're truer to the script than we even would have been if we had done the exact lines 100% of the time, by kind of hitting the spirit of those moments, oftentimes through improvisation. So I would say 75% are exactly as scripted, and then some of the moments are very much Natalie and Matt.
Yeah, my only criticism was, and I actually went back and watched it again because I didn't want to see the opening credits, kind of like Mission Impossible style, where they show you things that are going to happen later. But all that was in my mind because you really don't show anything, because anything could be happening that we're not familiar with. And so I went back and I was just like, because I was writing down, and I'm like, oh, well, now I know. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. When I went back and watched it a second time, I realized that's just a critic in me, that you're just letting us know that this is not all going to be fun and games. Now, I do have some questions for myself, but I'm going to ask them very carefully, and I want you to answer very carefully as not to reveal what we call, the spoiler alerts here. But was the cigar flicking always in the script, or was it shot a different way? Or did you try a different couple things there? Be careful.
Tell me why you're asking that.
Because it was awesome. And I thought, it was such a great scene. And then my first thought when I saw that was, I bet you he filmed that a couple different ways, and that was the best way.
See, you're spot on there. To begin with, the original scene, this is such an interesting exercise to be so careful about the spoilers. The original scene was scripted to happen in a forest. But when we shot this, there was when all the fires were raging, and there was clearly no way that anyone was going to let us light a cigar, even in a forest, much less light a fire of any kind. So we re-scripted it to happen around a dumpster.
Right.
Okay,
that's enough.
And then, we did the cigar flicking, which was then in the script a million times. And actually, what you see in the movie is a effects shot composited out of two different takes, because in the beginning take, the cigar left the frame and never came back in. And in the other take, the arc of the cigar into where it was going was exactly perfect, but the beginning didn't work. Yeah. So they kind of composited these two things over each other.
And this is a really just for me question. The final sound of the movie, did you always know that was going to be the final sound of the movie?
No, we were sitting in the sound mix. You're talking about the very, very last.
Yes, the last thing we hear before, that's it,
No, it just felt a little empty. We were sitting in the sound mix, and we were looking at the image, and it was kind of a little bit of an abstract image. Yeah. So we thought, it would be cool to kind of bring that sound back, but then distort it in a way that kind of does justice to the perversion that we saw during the movie. That was kind of the idea.
Okay, well, Into the Dark, episode number 5 down, out today. It's out there. Go check it out on Hulu. First of all, home run. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this episode. Especially at the end, I almost was applauding. I'm like, wow, that was that was well done. And I'm not just kissing your butt because that's the problem you get when you talk to me, because if I don't like something, I'm going to tell you about it. But I really had a good time, and I'm really excited for everybody to check out this episode.
Thank you.
It's right there on the internet, Hulu. It's Into the Dark series. First of all, they're all very good. I was really surprised. I had not watched any of them, and I was watching them to get to yours, just thinking that maybe they're connected somehow. Which they're all individual stories, and yours clearly, by the way, is the best. So I'm actually looking forward to seeing what you're going to do next, because I had a really good time. And make sure you pass along my praises to the writer, because I can't wait to see what he's going to write next too as well.
I'll tell him that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.